I will start with my overview of the Chartered Statistician Award and the benefits of holding the award. So I'm going to structure my presentation a little bit. First of all, I'll say a little about my background as a professional statistician. I guess to give you some context about where I'm coming from in presenting and how, in a sense, my experience as a professional statistician has informed the way in which I see Chartered Statistician and professional awards in general. I'll then say a little bit about support for professional statisticians provided by both a professional body like the RSS or from your employer, and just talk a little bit about how those two things interrelate. And since we'll have talked a fair bit about professional awards, professional statisticians, it's worth saying, well, what do we mean by the word professional? What is professionalism in this context? And then having, in a sense, given that general background, to hone in on specifically the RSS and its role as a professional body and the Chartered Statistician Award. And although the emphasis in this meeting is on the application process, one needs to be reminded that as a professional award, you need to go through an activity to retain the award. So I will talk about the process of revalidation, which is the renewal of the award that you need to go through periodically. And then finally, I will just, I guess, say a little bit about the Professional Statisticians Forum. Okay, so I don't intend to go into detail about my own career. I just really want to point out the career to give some context to the sorts of things you might think about when you're thinking about documenting your own career pathway when applying, or the sort of things you might think about when you're considering your professional development. So I started my career in academia. I was a lecturer in mathematical statistics at the University of Bradford for about 8 years. And then I moved on to work in the pharmaceutical sector with Pfizer. I worked in their R&D organisation, their research and development organisation, for 22 years. So I started off as a consulting statistician, working with and providing statistical advice to laboratory scientists and also to medics who were running clinical trials. I then moved on into a more managerial role as head of a group which Pfizer termed biometrics, which included statisticians, statistical programmers, and what is called in the pharmaceutical industry data managers. So I looked after a group which was responsible for input to the design of experiments and clinical trials, and then also were responsible for collecting data, for storing that data, for analysing and reporting and interpreting the data. So that was the group that I looked after there. And then subsequently, towards the end of my time at Pfizer, I was head of a development operations group, which captured those statistical disciplines, but also included a clinical operations group, including scientists and medics who were actually running clinical trials. And we were responsible for the clinical trials run by Pfizer in Europe and in parts of Africa, Asia, and Australia. So a sort of broad-based set of activities. I then decided to have a change in my career path, and I moved away from working for a large multinational company to becoming a single one-man statistician working in consultancy, and I've been doing that for the last 12 years. And typically I provide statistical advice on clinical trials work to small pharma companies, biotechs, and venture capital investors who are looking at investments in the life science sector. So the only other point that I want to mention from this slide is that, like all of you, as your careers develop, and maybe currently for you as well as your core job, you will tend to get involved with other activities which are either more broadly based in the organisation in which you're working. So for me, within Pfizer, we went through processes of restructuring and harmonisation across Europe and the US, and then including Japan. So that sort of restructuring or large project within your organisation you may get involved with. Sometimes you may get involved with activities which are sector-wide. So again, in my context, this was dealing with some things which were going on in the pharmaceutical industry broadly. And equally, you may get involved with activities which are related to your discipline. So, for example, I got involved with activities in the Royal Statistical Society and more recently in the Science Council. So I guess what I'm trying to put across is that there are many aspects to your career. There will be your core job, there will be other things you get involved with, and in fulfilling those activities there will be an element of professional development going on. So you need to be thinking about all of those things when you come to put together your application and to talk about the professional development that you've undertaken. Okay, so let's get at now talking a little bit about the opportunities for support that exist for professional statisticians. So you can get support from your professional body, you can get support from your employer. And to a large extent, these two areas of support that you could potentially gain advantage from are complementary and do really, the extent to which they provide you with support depends on the extent to which you go and seek it. So let me just say a little bit more about that and how the two are interrelated. So a professional body, its basic remit is to establish professional standards. And of course, those standards are defined to some extent by the professional awards it offers. And so the Chartered Statistician Award of the RSS is one of those. And of course, the employer provides you with an opportunity to practice, to apply your skills and knowledge. Now, these two are clearly interrelated because you can only achieve professional standards by actually applying your skills and knowledge. And so the employer and the professional body experiences are complementary in that respect. The professional body defines a professional pathway which is recognised by awards, and you'll see these as milestones. I'll come on to say a little bit about that, as how the RSS defines milestones in your professional career through the GradStat Award, through the CStat Award, the Chartered Scientist Award as well, which it offers, and through the process of retention of those awards. And of course, the organisation you work for hopefully will support you developing a career pathway. And of course, you need to develop that career pathway and gain those experiences in order to progress along the professional pathway that the professional body offers. And one of the other things that's complementary about professional body and employer is that they both provide a network of colleagues to help support your career development. With regard to the professional body, it's typically colleagues who are also statisticians who may work in the same sector as you, or they may work in different sectors of employment. However, the colleagues that you come across in your company or in your business sector that you work in, these will typically maybe be from other disciplines. And so by looking across these two networks, as it were, you have a great diversity in colleagues who you can liaise with and work with in order to help develop your career. The development opportunities that you gain from your employer are really your career progression within the organisation in which you're working. And of course, your employer has a vested interest in developing your skills and knowledge to enable you to become more useful to that organisation. But presumably you've chosen to work for your employer because those aspirations of your employer to develop you are aligned with your own aspirations of the career pathway you want to take. With regard to the professional body, there are development opportunities, but it's really down to the individual to take them or leave them. There's no membership of the RSS doesn't demand that you go to conference. It doesn't demand that you participate in sections or local groups, but they're there for you to take advantage of, and it's for you, I guess, to choose which ones at various stages of your career are of value to you. So the RSS does run a conference, it does run meetings, does run training courses, there are other sections, local groups, and so on. If you would work for a good employer, then that employer will have an annual performance appraisal and goal-setting exercise, which will set goals for you to achieve. And if you work for a good employer, the employer will realise to achieve goals, you need to develop your skills and knowledge. So there'll be an opportunity to develop skills and knowledge through participation in that appraisal process. In a parallel sense, in order to retain professional awards with the society, like the Chartered Statistician award, then there is a periodic professional appraisal, and we'll come on to say a little bit more about that, which is the activity which is often referred to as revalidation or renewal of the professional award. So there are these two support structures, and I guess we're concentrating today on the professional body side of that. But I hope through this sort of little discussion we've realised that the professional body and the employer aspects are somewhat interrelated. Okay, so let's say a little bit more about professionalism, because I've used the term professional on a number of occasions. And I just wonder if somebody was to ask you, so what do you do at work? What is your job? How many of you would say professional statistician, or whether you just say, well, I'm a statistician, or I'm a data analyst, or I'm a something else? How many of you would include the word professional in there? Well, if you sign up to be a chartered statistician, then you are signing up to be a professional. And so what does that mean? What are the expectations of a professional? Well, there are some very elaborate definitions of what a professional is, but I think this initial one on the slide here is the one that captures the essence of being a professional. It's not only about what you can do, it's about how you do it. So professionals, the expectation of a professional is that they are trustworthy, ethical, up-to-date, and competent. Now, most professional bodies expand upon those terms, and they codify what it is to be a professional in a code of conduct. And the RSS is no different. When it introduced the CStat award in 1993, it introduced a professional code of conduct which CStats, Chartered Statisticians, are expected to abide by. And like all professional bodies, the code covers a range of aspects of the way in which a professional is expected to operate, and the way in which the RSS code, and indeed many codes from across the sciences, are structured is in four basic areas. The primary responsibility of a professional is to work in the public interest, so that's sort of always written as number one. And then there are obligations to your employers and clients. There are obligations to the profession and your professional body. And there is also a requirement to maintain professional competence and to work with integrity. So these things are expanded in the Code of Conduct itself. I think Sarah has handed out to you a little brochure which we produced a couple of years ago, which includes the Code of Conduct, or at least an abbreviated version of it. I think there's a reference of how to link to the full Code of Conduct in this little brochure. The third example I put on there is just to sort of illustrate that there are different ways in which organisations go about defining professionalism, but they all have the same essence about them. So I thought I'd just throw in the Science Council's approach. And they have a three-tier view of professionalism in science. They talk around technical competence and ethical competence, and then they build on top of that engagement in CPD, continuing professional development, and reflective practice. And I'll say a little bit more about reflective practice as we go through, just in case it's a term that needs a little bit more explanation. As I say, people have spent a lot of time on professionalism. In fact, if you go onto Amazon and look, you'll find that there are lots and lots of books written on professionalism. Many of them are quite heavy reading, but one that's quite a good read is this book by Meister, which I quite liked because the subtitle, I think of it, draws out an important aspect of professionalism. So they talk about true professionalism being the courage to care about your people, your clients, and your career. And in this book, they do talk extensively about the fact that professionals are not people who focus on doing the task in hand and, in a sense, feel that they don't have time for anything else. Professionals are people who, by the way they approach their work, retain a focus on the requirement to be supportive of their colleagues, to go the extra mile for their clients, and one of the ways in which they can go the extra mile for their clients is go the extra mile for themselves, and to be constantly looking at how they can develop their own career and their own knowledge base and their own skill set. So that book's certainly worth a look at. I think it's relatively cheap, and you can certainly pick up second-hand copies via Amazon, I'm sure. Right, so that's the sort of general background around professionalism. And so let's now talk very specifically about the professional pathway that the RSS has in place. And there are on this slide, there are three milestones that are defined by the RSS. And in fact, the third one is a recurring milestone. So in essence, if we lived forever, there would be an infinite number of milestones. But unfortunately, we don't live forever. So the first milestone is a milestone called the Graduate Statistician Award, which is basically an award given to people who the society feels have the education to underpin a career as a professional statistician. So that is pitched at the second class honours degree level or higher, on a course which has a depth and breadth of statistical coverage. And rather than get into the specifics of what all that means, I will leave that to the discussion, or you can ask me a question about what that means. But needless to say, the society does have a benchmark against which to judge courses, so you do not have to be on an accredited course to get GradStat, although it does help. The society will consider you on a case-by-case basis if you've not attended an accredited course. The second milestone is the achievement of the Chartered Statistician Award, and typically what we're looking for there is to build on that educational foundation to show that you have been successful in practice as a statistician. So what does successful in practice mean? Well, it means that you've shown evidence of being able to take on responsibility, that the scope of the work you do and the extent to which you can work independently has grown over a period of time. And the typical time frame that the RSS is looking at is over a 5-year period to show sufficient evidence of growth. If you've gone through the application process or thinking about it, you'll see that we require you to submit information, and we also require you to submit referees' names so that we can seek further information from referees about the success of your statistical practice. A similar award in terms of level is the Chartered Scientist Award, which the RSS is licensed to give. The criteria for that are a little different, and I can go into them, but since today is focused on CStat, I'll only do that if you specifically ask me to look at it. But it is an award at a very similar level. And in fact, chartered status across the sciences or even and across engineering subjects tend to be at a very similar level in terms of the assessment of education and experience that's needed to become chartered. Career progression, then, the final step is to make the point that for professional awards, unlike an academic award, a professional award is intended to say something about you today rather than about what you achieved in the past. And so there is a requirement that once you have the award, that you continue to manage your career, and periodically the society will go through with you a revalidation process, which is basically confirmation that you're continuing to develop yourself professionally and keep up to date. Right, so I guess in this slide, and I don't want to go through all of the points on the slide, I just wanted really to make the point that although the GradStat and CStat awards were introduced in 1993, the Society hasn't stood still over that period. The awards have evolved to some extent, and indeed the environment of professional awards for statisticians has evolved. So let me just pick out one or two of the key points here. As I mentioned, at the starting point of CStat, there was always a code of conduct in place. The code of conduct talked very generally about the need to maintain your professional competency, the need to undertake professional development activities. But it was felt that we needed to be a little bit more specific about what we meant by that. And so in 2004, the Society introduced a CPD policy, which was updated in 2009. And one of the reasons for the update was to align the Society's thinking with the thinking of the Science Council around what constitutes CPD and how you should collect the information. And so we did the update then, and that was because in 2008 the RSS became a licensed body of the Science Council to award the Chartered Scientist Award. And to become a chartered scientist within the RSS, you have to first become a chartered statistician, and indeed you can apply for both awards simultaneously if you wish. I'm sure Sarah will say a little about that later on. The landscape has changed around professional awards because the other major international statistical association, the American Statistical Association, introduced their Professional Statistician Award, PStat, which is equivalent to CStat. They introduced that in 2010, and I think they have around 200 people holding the PStat award. We introduced revalidation in 2012 on a 5-year cycle. We announced it in the beginning of 2012. We also introduced the Professional Statisticians Forum because we wanted a forum within the RSS which focused on the statistician rather than focusing on statistical science. Many of the Society's activities focus on statistical science, and we felt that there was a need for something to complement that, and so we introduced the Statisticians Forum in 2012. And in 2014, on the 21st anniversary of the Code of Conduct, we decided it was about time to update it. And we updated it to reword it. We benchmarked against a whole range of other codes of conduct of other statistical professional bodies and other scientific professional bodies to have the code of conduct which is currently in place. The numbers given there were the numbers around the end of 2015. I'm true to being a statistician, I've just put inequalities there rather than giving you exact numbers. But basically speaking, since 1993, remarkably, the number of statisticians and chartered statisticians and graduate statisticians has remained between 27% and 28% of the total membership of the RSS. It's stayed at that figure constantly every year since 1993, which is a remarkable fact, I think. I don't think it's necessarily a good fact or a bad fact, but it's remarkable that it's stayed constant. So what is the value of holding the CStat award? We had a survey some 3 or 4 years ago in which we asked people who hold the award, well, why do you have it? Why do you value it? And they mentioned a number of things, and it seemed to be that it depended a little on the stage they were at in their career. It depended a little on the sector in which they were employed, even depended a little on who their employer was. As to why they were holding the CStat award. But it sort of is apparent that it's probably worth holding throughout your career, but for at different times of your career there'll be different reasons why it is of value to you. So specifically, some reported that it had helped them in their career progression. Some people commented that it would have been helpful in successful job applications. Others had said that it had been helpful in career progression within a particular organisation. Others talked about it raising their confidence, holding a professional award, and their self-esteem. This was typically people who worked in a multidisciplinary setting where people in other disciplines tended to hold professional awards, whether they be chartered status or something else. And clearly if you work in, say, automotive manufacturing, where there's maybe many engineers, they would hold their Chartered Engineering Award. Certainly if you work in a more scientific area, then chartered status is held by many biologists, chemists, and other disciplines, and indeed many applied disciplines, and across all the sciences, including the social sciences as well. Some basically said that they'd found value in the award because it was valued by their employers and also valued by clients. And there were two quite distinct points being made here. One was that for some employers, it's very important for them to demonstrate that they are employing people of high caliber. So this might be true if you're working in an industry which is a regulated industry, like the healthcare sector, or it may be if you're working in an industry where you have to, in a sense, where it's very competitive and you have to sell the quality of work you can do. It's important to sell the fact that you have high qualified people. And so some organisations promote their staff holding professional awards, and that's why some people held the award. Others who were, say, doing consultancy said that often their clients really didn't know whether somebody would be an appropriate statistician to hire or not, and many of them were reassured by the fact that the person they were hiring was recognised as being a professional statistician by their professional body. Others argued that, in a sense, they were pleased to hold the award because they felt they were doing a service to the profession. I mean, I guess there is a general feeling, and I guess it's a truism, that if every qualified statistician, in a sense, held CStat, then it would reduce the ambiguity around whether somebody you're hiring is a worthwhile statistician or not. And some people hold the award in order to be supportive of their profession and indeed of their professional body, the RSS. There is a view now which I think is a correct view, that there is an increased focus on people holding professional awards. I think certainly in the engineering context, then, you know, to be a legitimate engineer, you need to be a chartered engineer. To be an accountant, you need to be a chartered accountant. But across many other disciplines now, the professional awards are being increasingly valued. And the first point, I guess, is that there is an increasing focus on professionals, their accountability, and for them to need for them to work in the public interest. And this was, in a sense, work to a code of conduct. And I guess, the classic example is around the financial crisis that we had a few years ago, and many people in key positions to make financial decisions were actually not particularly well qualified in that field. Also, there is a raised awareness across many areas, including policy making in government, that there's an increased recognition on evidence-based decision making, and an awareness that, of course, that evidence can be misinterpreted. So people are looking for somebody who can give a reliable interpretation of that evidence, and of course, statisticians hopefully would fall into that category. And then the final 2 points are really interlinked. It is possible, if you're an employer and you're not particularly familiar with the field of statistics and you want to hire a statistician, you might be presented with a number of CVs where people have done courses in statistics, but their course title does not include the word statistics. They may have had several worthwhile job roles as a statistician, but none of their job titles included the word statistician. They may have been data analysts or titles which just don't include the word. And so it is potentially confusing for employers and for clients wishing to hire statisticians on a short-term basis to sort of pick through a CV and understand whether the person is truly qualified as a statistician. Of course, if they hold CStat, then of course the professional body, the RSS, has done the work for them. They can have some assurance around that. And the final comment was there is less control of career pathways these days. In my generation, people might expect, potentially, if they wish to work for the same employee for the majority of their career, that's unlikely to be the norm in the future. Now, there are people who, when I've been trying to promote CStat in the past, who've come to me and said, well, I don't really need it. I do consulting for a group of people. They all know me. Those who like me come to me. Those who don't like me don't come to me, and I'm quite happy. Well, first point might be that's not a particularly professional attitude, and we could go into that. But I guess my retort these days, and whether it's a good one or not, you can help me work that out, is, well, how has not holding the CStat award enhanced your career as a statistician, enhanced your support to your colleagues in your profession, and enhanced your support to the Royal Statistical Society as a professional body? And it's hard to answer anything positive on those fronts. But it is true that holding CStat may not be of value to you. Certainly if you apply for it and then just, in a sense, put it in the cupboard and let nobody else know that you're a CStat, and in a sense don't take advantage of being a chartered statistician, then it probably won't help you very much. But that's down to you. There is potential for it to be valuable to you. But that depends to some extent on yourself, your own circumstances, the stage you're at in your career, your employer, and so on. So I think the response to that is something that you need to work through yourself. But I think there is potential for it to be of great value to you. What I want to do now is finally just say a few words about revalidation. We introduced it because generally we felt it would raise the credibility of CStat as a professional award, because a professional award needs to say something about you today rather than you in 1993 when you actually got your CStat. So by having revalidation, then there is credibility that being a CStat means something to those who might benefit from your work. It was also advocated when we went to employer focus groups. They obviously felt that it would be more beneficial, more meaningful to them if we introduce revalidation or renewal of it. And it reflects trends that, although many professional bodies in the past mandated that people undertook professional development but didn't monitor it, there has been a shift now to say that, well, you can't just mandate it and turn a blind eye as to whether people are actually undertaking professional development. You need to periodically monitor that that is the case. And also, we were reassured because one of the aspects of the Chartered Scientist Award is that that needs to undergo annual revalidation. So because the RSS had signed up to be a licensed body for that, we'd had to initiate a revalidation process for those chartered statisticians who were also chartered scientists, and we found we could do it quite well, and therefore we felt we'd be able to undertake a reasonably good revalidation process for our chartered statisticians. So what is revalidation all about? We are checking around whether people are adhering to the Society's Code of Conduct, and we're checking for compliance with the Society's CPD policy. That's essentially what we're doing in the revalidation. So for CStat, it's every 5 years we're doing this. At the moment, the way we check adherence to this Code of Conduct is by asking people to sign a declaration, essentially, and compliance with the CPD policy is by providing evidence, providing a CPD summary to indicate that they are complying. And at a very high level, what is the CPD policy of the Society? It's basically saying that annually you need to be undertaking a certain amount of professional development, which is strongly linked either to your current job role or to your aspirations for career progression. It's helping you develop the skills and knowledge you need there. So we're expecting you to undertake at least 60 learning hours. So learning hours isn't elapsed hours. So if you're sitting here for 3 hours, it doesn't mean you've gathered 3 learning hours of CPD. If you've been just looking at your mobile phone and doing your emails, which I'm sure none of you are doing, then the number of learning hours would be 0. Okay? If you've heard me talk before and you're saying, oh, it's just going over the same old stuff I've heard before, I'm learning nothing new particularly, 1 or 2 gems, then you may have only 0.5 of a learning hour. Okay? But if it's new to you, all this stuff, then it may be 3 learning hours. We're keen that people take advantage of a whole range of learning opportunities that come along to them as professionals. And so we're keen that you undertake activities in at least 3 of the 5 categories: work-based learning, professional learning from professional activities, learning from formal educational activities, learning through self-directed activities where you've gone off and followed something of your own interest. And then there's this other category, which is typically people gaining valuable skills, typically transferable skills, by doing something away from their core job role as a statistician. So it might be within your organisation being involved with a broad project around, I don't know what, but it might require you to lead a team. It might require you to make decisions or advocate an approach. So you're developing skills which are going to be useful to you in your statistical role. Or equally, it might be some work you're doing away from your professional life. Maybe you provide some time for a charity and you do some management of some activities for a charity or whatever. Again, you may develop skills which are valuable to you in your profession. But the important thing that we want to see is that whatever you're doing has benefit to either your current job role or your progression of your career. And so this is what the reflection is all about. So we're very hot on the fact that you need to reflect on the benefits. And we want 2 things here. Benefits to yourself. So, what have I learned? What are the skills I've gained? What is the knowledge I've gained through doing this activity? And also to users of your work. So there we want to know, so what have you been able to deliver better than you could have delivered without doing this activity for your employer, your clients, your colleagues, your students? So whatever sector you're working in, you do have clients. Whether those clients are your students who you supervise, whether those clients are the project team you work for, whether the client is your employer, or whether you're a consultant and your client is somebody who's actually hired you to do a piece of work. So these are the things that we're very keen that you play back your CPD to. So CPD isn't about, oh, I went to conference, that's, 3 times 8 hours, 24, we're done. CPD is about, so what did you gain by that? How has it helped you? What skills have you gained? How can you use that in your current job? How does it help you take the next step in your career progression? The other point that I want to stress is we're not looking for CPD which is solely around technical skill development. So this is a model that I've used on a number of occasions. So yes, we want to hear about things you're doing in all of these levels to gain skills and knowledge to help you be more effective in the workplace. So there's technical stuff that you need to continually keep up to date with and develop. But equally, if you've moved into a new sector in which you're working, then you need to find out about how that sector operates, how your company operates. What are the goals of your company? How can you contribute towards them? And to make an impact, you need to have the interpersonal skills to influence people, to negotiate your point of view, to work in a team, to lead a team, to mentor and support other people. And then depending on the size of the organisation, if you work for a very large organisation, they tend to have processes in place that are about managing people. So appraisal of people, allocation of people to tasks, project management of tasks, problem solving, decision making. So how does your organisation go about doing those things? If you know that, then you can be more effective. So the technical foundation would typically provide you with competence and confidence in your work. Knowledge of context makes sure that what you're doing is relevant. Interpersonal skills make sure that you can make an impact. And getting to know these processes makes sure you can be effective in the environment in which you're working. Right, so that's really all I want to say in the context of what's CStat all about, what are we looking for with regard to renewal and so on. Just a brief word about the Professional Statisticians Forum. We set this up to focus on statisticians rather than statistical science. We've run meetings about effective professional development. We've run meetings on career case studies, making an impact in the workplace, statistical consultancy. Those are the areas we focus on, focusing on the statistician rather than statistical science, although we obviously mention the statistical science as in these sessions. We have webinars and face-to-face meetings. They're open to all. You don't have to be a chartered statistician or a graduate statistician to come along to them. And there is a web page which advertises future events and holds material on past events, including webcasts. So